Little book right now called 1971, right? Because between the dates of 1965 and 1975, if you look at all the civil changes, the cultural changes in Western societies, you had hormonal birth control skyrockets. It existed before that, but it was more popular. It was more encouraged for women to be taking it right around the time of the sexual revolution, right? Which of course triggered the sexual revolution. Then you see the spike in divorces, which almost mirrors the divorce rate mirrors the use of hormonal birth control. Then you've got no fault divorce because there's so much divorce happening that they've got to streamline it. They got to fast track divorce and make it easier. Then 1971, we go off the gold standard. Now suddenly women are like, oh, this is so great. Now women can finally have a savings and they can have credit and everything. Not because of Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan, but because the insurance companies and the banks said, fuck yeah, we're on a fiat currency. You can have whatever you want.
That is an interesting correlation that Rollo brings up here. But, I mean, when you really consider a lot of the math that you can point out in this, the conversation that no one wants to have is that vulcanized condoms have arguably had more of an effect on the birth rates than hormonal birth control. Vulcanized condoms became widely available in 1855, whereas hormonal birth control came out in 1960. Nearly a 100-year difference. Within the same time frame with crude birth rates, meaning 1855 to 1915 for vulcanized condoms becoming widely available, and 1960 to 2020, which would be 60 years after birth control, you do see a following trend. For the 60 years of birth control, the crude birth rate went from 23.8 to 12, which is an 11.8 decrease. In the same time frame, from 1855 to 1915, you get a 46.93 to 29.72, which is a 17.21 decrease. Which means that there was a larger drop in the crude birth rate during the earlier period of 1855 to 1915 when vulcanized condoms became more available compared to the period of hormonal birth control of 1960 to 2020. And that may suggest that earlier interventions in family planning had a more significant impact on reducing the birth rates. I mean, obviously there is cultural and social factors, economic changes, medical advances in child survival, education and women's rights, or women's rights, quote unquote, global population policies, etc., 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 but that applies equally to birth control, hormonal birth control. As much criticism as Rollo gives hormonal birth control, from the crude birth rate statistics over the same period of time, you can say that if anything, the invention of vulcanized condoms contributed more to it. So thus, while hormonal birth control is often credited with revolutionizing contraception, vulcanized condoms may indeed have had a greater overall impact on reducing the birth rate over their first 60 years, especially since they were available during a period of major social and economic change. Also, even if you're looking at relative measures, it took 90 years from the invention of vulcanized condoms for there to even be a blip in an upward measure, meaning 1940 to 1945 it went up to 2.34 in terms of addition. It took only 25 years after hormonal birth control for there to be a same thing, meaning 1980 to 1985 it went up 0.5. A smaller decrease granted, but a smaller increase granted, but still one at all. So, this highlights how vulcanized condoms have had a more profound, sustained effect on lowering the birth rate, whereas hormonal birth control's impact was shorter lived before it faced the influence of other societal changes. I think if one is going to have an honest conversation about birth control, we have to look at it from a holistic measure and go by both men and women's actions. I do think that there is a place to criticize women on this, but people should also realize it is not that birth control invented the mindset for people to want to have sex without pregnancy. That mindset has always existed. There has been records of birth control, such as condoms and the like, going back as far as human history. There has always been a desire to have sex without the pregnancy. It's just now, recently, we've had more success at it. So, really what happened is that there was always a demand for it, and it's just caught up just recently. Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye and get wise.